Our Stories Vietnam is a KRWG local production honoring some of our area Vietnam veterans. These stories could not have been told without the cooperation of not only the veterans who offered to participate, but the families and local veteran groups as well. We are grateful for the support of New Mexico State University and other area organizations. KRWG's presentation of Our Stories Vietnam has been made possible in part by the visionary gift from Stan Fulton, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and viewers like you. Thank you. These are the stories of the Vietnam War as told to us by veterans. KRWG has sought to present archival footage and personal photos that approximates the location and time of their stories. However, they are not actual depictions of the situation or personal recollections.
My name is Robert P. Blunt, and I was a Naval Aviation Cadet, age 18 in World War II. And you go through training and you get your wings, and then you are active duty in the Navy for several years. And right after you're assigned there, the Gulf of Tonkin incident occurs, and right after that happened, you were flying into Vietnam, and that's what you did in a support effort for the operation. And you asked the fellow on duty in there, well, what do they have in Da Nang? Ops officer says, we don't know. If you get back tonight, you can tell us. And so that was kind of a humorous thing. I remember I picked up the people that were out there from Washington, and off we go. We fly into Da Nang. At that point in time, the French had just poured a hard surface runway, maybe 4,000 feet long, but it was just concrete, kind of leveled out on the ground. But that's all Da Nang was at that point in time. I was not involved in any close air support, moved out of fighter squadrons where I had spent my whole life. So I was in this support squadron. So I never got hit. You told where to fly, so you fly there. About the long and short of it. I got shot at in Vietnam, but I never fired a shot in anger. No, I didn't. I was never in a foxhole in Vietnam. For any combat situation, you've got to have a major support effort. You know, you don't think about that. Your support effort is just monumental for the guys that are out there walking around on patrol. Then all the mail, you're loading just bags and bags of mail in the aircraft. You go out to the ship and you deliver what you got. Then you get the casualties who are on the ships, fly them back to the Philippines, and mostly to Clark Air Force Base, which is, they have a big hospital there. That's the type of support that you do for a war effort. It's just one thing after another. The aircraft, you launch them and they go on their strike and come back and land aboard, get refueled. I was an aircraft handling officer before Vietnam on an aircraft carrier. Well, they got typhoons in the South China Sea, and you just flying right through the typhoon, doesn't matter. And you're not a hurricane hunter or anything, but you're just going through there and doing your thing. When you're flying back to the Philippines, okay, you've been from the Philippines out to a ship, in country, done, picked up what you had to do, back to the ship. Now you're flying back to the Philippines. Well, that's a 16-hour day. 2 o'clock in the morning, flying across the South China Sea. And if you can tune your radio to AM and you can pick up XENT, Laredo, Texas, 500,000 watts of things. And you're in the South China Sea, and you can hear, and you're flying back into the Philippines like that.
There was times when you just know something's going to happen. They tell us, hey, look, there's movement in that village over there, or this is going to happen, we're going to go over there. And you get that uneasy feeling, you know, that the adrenaline, the nervousness. You think, oh man, but you know you have to do it. That's what you signed up to do. You know, you got your Marines with you, they're going to fight for you, you're going to fight for them. Your chances of staying alive are better when you're moving forward and fighting and showing them that, acting like you're not afraid, showing them like acting like you want to get them. I was scared a lot over there, a lot, but you know, I just did what I had to do. And we would work patrols there in Fulak, and I just didn't like it there. We get hit every night, and we would lose a Marine here and there. Not any serious firefights, but just 2, 3, 4 minute ambushes. We'd get hit and we'd lay down fire, and then it would stop, and they'd take off. I remember a platoon has like about 30 Marines. There's a lieutenant, platoon sergeant, 2 gun teams. We needed some more guys, so that evening we got, it was on a Wednesday evening, I still remember. It was January the 31st, and we got 3 new guys. We got a Navy corpsman, and we got 2 guys straight out of training. They were friends from Camp Pendleton, and they both had a mohawk haircut. I still remember that. I don't remember their names. I could see flares all night long. When a base gets hit, or there's problems somewhere and the Marines need to get some lighting, you know, so they could see what they're doing, you know, helping the wounded and stuff like that, they'll call in some Air Force planes, and they drop flares and it lights up the area so you can see what you're doing. Well, there was flares that night. Just Thursday morning, we'd always got up with the sun, and we had always moved, saddle up and move. All of a sudden, the radio man gets a call, and gets a lieutenant on there, and he's talking to somebody. He says, double time, double time. We took off running. As soon as we got around that village, they opened up on us. And I was trying to find a place to lay down, and those 2 Marines that we got the night before, they both got killed almost immediately. Sergeant Hall says, Ramirez, go get them. So I go there and try to get those Marines. I can't get them. The minute I grab one of them, there's just all kinds of fire over my head, and I'm trying to hide, trying to get cover from that fire, and then I go up and I try to get them, I just can't. They were heavy, and then with all that gunfire, I just couldn't get them. Maybe 10, 15 minutes, and the Huey gunships come in. They're beautiful machines, I gotta tell you. They came in, and they have rockets, they have M50 machine guns. There was 2 or 3 of them. They just opened up on that field where the North Vietnamese was. And I was able to grab those guys, and I pulled them in. I grabbed both of them. And the man, they were heavy. And the Sergeant Hall says, put them all in one spot. Put them all over there. So I'm getting them over there, and there's several more Marines that are wounded. The corpsman that came in the night before with those guys, he's wounded himself. He got shot in the leg, and I looked at him, and I could see him working on himself. And then the other Marines were getting wounded. But I was able to get them, you know, to that area. That artillery, you could hear it flying over our heads, and right where the enemy was, just blasting them. And I was, man, that sounds, now it sounds good. It's not, they're not trying to shoot me and you know, land on me. So that artillery sounded like music to me. It was just coming in. Then all of a sudden it just stopped and there was no more firing. But we were expecting some more help, so we just kept our positions. The helicopter came in. It was a CH-47. It let down the back, the gate, the tail, and I was putting those Marines in there. And we got it loaded and that thing took off. There was only about 17 of us left in that platoon after that. So I went down and laid down with the other guys just to wait to see if they were going to come back and wait for the Marines to come. And someone says, "Hey, Sergeant, the corpsman left his pistol out there." The corpsman used to carry a .45 caliber. And I thought to myself, the next thing I'm going to hear is, "Ramirez, go get it." And a second later I heard, "Ramirez, go get it." So I just got up and I took off and I picked up that the cartridge belt that had the .45, and I turned around and boom, I just went flying through the air. And I felt something on my leg and my helmet came off, the pistol went over there, my rifle went over there, and I landed hard. And I remember Marines telling me, "Man, if you're ever in a motor attack or something, you lose your helmet, you better find it and put it on, because if you get shrapnel in your head, in your brain, you're gonna be done." So the first thing I did, I grabbed that helmet and put it on. I grabbed my rifle and crawled to the dike there where the other Marines were. And I didn't get the .45. I just left it there. So then I'm thinking, I wonder if I got my leg blown off. I was remembering Eno's got his leg blown off. I was thinking, I wonder if I got my leg blown off. And the Marines were saying, "You all right? You all right?" And I'm like, so I moved my toes in my boot. I think my leg's there. So I turned around and looked at it, and sure enough, my leg was there. So they call that medevac, the Chinook. It was called the Chinook, the CH-47. It said, "Come back, we got one more." And the Chinook tells them, we can't go back. We got too many Marines here, and there's a cap unit north there. They just keep going north, and we'll send another medevac over there. So in the meantime, the corpsman tearing my pants and shooting me up with morphine, and then say, "Hey, we got to move. We got to go. We got to go up to that cap unit." I was just so weak. I could barely stand up. One Marine got me. I put my arm around his shoulder, and we just walked down that Highway 1. And man, I said, "I hope we get there soon," because I was just so tired. And then there's a bunker, and Sergeant Hall says, "Get in that bunker. And when you see that medevac coming, you get in it." I said, "Okay, yes sir, I will." And so I closed my eyes, opened my eyes, and no one's there. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? I see some Marines on the highway. They're patrolling. They're going in a single column up that direction. So I yell as loud as I could. I'm yelling, "Hey, hey!" The last Marine turned around and he saw me. He came running towards me, and I got out of that bunker and I'm trying to run toward him, and he got me like in a fireman's carry. The lieutenant says, "What are you doing there?" I said, "Well, I got hit this morning, sir, and I was waiting for a medevac. I passed out." So he gets on the radio. He says, "We need a medevac over here." And I said, "Okay," and the road went up toward the top of a hill. I see that medevac coming. The lieutenant says, "Get that Marine up there." So they got me in a fireman's carry. He ran with me. He turned me over to another Marine. He ran. He turned me over to another Marine. He ran to the top of the hill. I got in that medevac. They took me to some MASH unit. I don't know where it was. Stopped there at the tarmac, and he says, "See that building over there?" I go, "Yeah, it was probably 100 meters away." He says, "That's where you want to go." I said, "Okay." So I walked, barely, you know, the little strength I have left. And I got to that building, and I go into the door, and I look down the hallway, and there's nothing but Marines laying down on both sides of the hallway. And I'm thinking, well, I guess this is my spot. So I just laid down right there, right next to the door. And I passed out. I'd wake up, crawl outside and throw up until I don't even know what time it was. They didn't put me to sleep, but they numbed my leg. And the chaplain comes in and he's just talking to me, you know. He says, "Where are you from?" You know, just talking to me, making me feel good. And they got most of that shrapnel out. And then they put me on a C-130 that night and took me to a hospital in Da Nang. I was just there laying in the hospital bed, and I was out of it. And some Marine came up to me and he woke me up. He goes, hey, Marine, wake up." I woke up. He goes, the colonel's over here, he's giving out the Purple Heart, so you got to stay awake. And I looked at him, and he was in the next bed over. So I said, okay. So I sat up on my bed, and the next thing I know, they were waking me up again. I could stay awake. And they go, hey, and there's a colonel there, and he had this medal, and he goes, this is a Purple Heart. What happened to you? How did you get hit? So I explained to him about how I got hit and everything, and then he gives me a little background on the Purple Heart. That was called the George Washington Medal. And then I didn't have a shirt on or anything. He pulled my blanket up, and he pinned the medal on my blanket, and shook my hands, and there were some other officers with him. And I got my Purple Heart in the hospital. And then I took it off that blanket, and I looked at it, and wow, yeah, this is a real Purple Heart. And I had about 2 weeks left. And so we went to another area, and the sergeant told me at that time, he says, you know what, Ramirez, the chopper's coming in bringing in supplies tomorrow. You get in that chopper, you're going back. It was December. I'm thinking, I hope nothing happens tonight. I hope it's a quiet night. And it was a quiet night. And got up in the morning and just there, and the chopper's coming in, and the Marines come over and say, hey man, you made it, man, you made it. I had an Army flak jacket, because they had a collar on them. I had an Army backpack, because they were so much better than the Marine backpacks. And I had all this Army stuff. And the Marines kept saying, hey, give me that, you promised me that jacket, that flak jacket. And you promised me that backpack. And I said, okay, you know, and here's my ammo, and here's my, you know, my sea rations and stuff. And then I got in that chopper and I left. You would think I would be elated, but I was not. I just didn't want to leave those guys there. And I wanted to go home. I wanted to see my mom and dad. Show them. I said, look, Mom, I made it. And my nieces were there. And my mom made some Mexican food. Man, it was the best food I had in over a year. But it was hard to leave those guys. If anybody tells you that we lost that war, don't believe them. We won every major battle there. The Marines, the Army, 173rd Airborne, 101st Airborne, the 1st Cav, the riverboat guys from the Navy. We won every battle. I think about it, I said, man, I was just a blessed Marine. I could have got killed so easy. Not just that time when I got hit. When I jumped into that bunker, just that split second before the rocket hit it, it's just not my time to go. God wants me to stay a little bit longer, so. I know I was doing something for the Vietnamese people. I met the greatest guys while I was there. And it's just, I wouldn't want to wish it on other people. I wouldn't want my nephews to go there and go through what I went through, but I'm glad I did. You know, what's done is done, and nobody appreciates it, but nobody forced me to do it either. That was my choice. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be called a Marine, and that's what I did.
My name's Henry Morales. I ended up in Vietnam. I was drafted in 1968. I didn't really know what I was gonna be, whether I was gonna be an infantry, whatever, so I was sent there. It was schooling for mine specialist. Then again, I had no idea what it was about until I started going through the training, and I said, oh my God, you know, this is for real. It's not a joke anymore. When we got hit the first time, as soon as we got there, you know, that's when the first time we landed in Zion, that's when we got hit by mortars and, you know, whatever was around. That's when it's real. It's for real. When we got off, there was a bunch of them that said, I wonder why they called this place Rocket City. And one of the guys, a wise ass, said, come again? They're hitting us. They were hitting us. That where we were at, it was called Rocket City because they were always getting hit in there. That's where I was most of the time for my 11 months and 13 days. As a young soldier, hell yeah, I was scared. Hell yeah, I was scared. Was I gonna come back home? You know, that's what you think. Am I gonna be one of the lucky ones to get back home? Or is this gonna be day after day after day? You know, and it was, you know, we expected. It scared the hell out of us. My duties were to sweep the roads. I was a mine specialist. From Fire Base Gym, that's a place where we were at. That's a Fire Base Gym. From there, I would have to sweep the road maybe 2-3 miles every morning. In other words, you're right on the main road. There was a main road from our Fire Base Gym to wherever the people were gonna transport stuff to, okay? Sweeping the road and see if you would pick up mines. It was me and another guy first in line. We were the first ones there. It was a hard job. To be honest with you, as a Chicano, as a Mexican, I would get on my knees and I would pray to the Lord to take care of all of us, because we didn't know whether we were coming back. And after that, I'd check my equipment. Yeah, it worked, but sometimes, you know, like I said, it worked there and all that. Depends how deep the mine was. If I would locate a mine, I would have to dig around it. It was you know, like I tell you, Russian roulette. That's the way I felt about it. Because if I made a mistake, I was a goner. The roads I used to sweep were nothing but dirt roads. There was hardly any paving. Saigon there was, but where we were at, no. It was strictly nothing but dirt roads. Yeah, but I had no choice. That was my job, and that's what I did for the 11 months and 13 days. Had no choice whatsoever. Something I liked? No. But I was sent to do a job, so I went and did what I had to do to protect my country. You know, I lost a lot of friends. Like this time that we went into that R&R, we all went together. We were a unit. We were all together. One night we were partying. That was the last night we were going to be there. We partied. We got together, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, you know. We all got together, played the guitar, sang, and next day we all had to go back to our duty, you know. Well, I had to go out and we had to clear a road. Okay, it was the sweepers and the tanks and over that, but we were the first one. So happened that day I finished sweeping the road. And since I was one of the guys that give the command that the roads were clear, I figured it had cleared. The mine detector didn't pick up one of the mines. It didn't pick it up. I guess it was buried too deep in order for the mine to pick up. When I gave the sign that everything was clear, the first truck that went over was 3 of our friends that were partying that night. That truck hit that mine and it blew him away. I looked up. I seen him. I seen him flying. It's one of the worstest feelings that anybody can have. You know, because you go in there knowing nobody, you become a family, you know. And till this day, it's hard. You know, here we are, 18, 19, 20-year-old, fighting a war that we knew we had to do it. But we knew we were going to do friends, but when it really happens in front of your eyes, that's when it really hits you the most. I felt that it was my fault that they lost their lives. But in reality, it wasn't. It was the detector wasn't working. But It's the guilt that I've always carried with me. You know, they announced it on January the 12th at 4:30 p.m. Vietnam time that we were coming home, and all of us looked at each other, oh my God, we're finally going back home. But yet they didn't say when. It probably took about a week after. And when they announced that the Big Red One was coming home, and they told us the personnel that were coming back home, and they announced my day, so oh my God, I turned to Fred, and I said, Fred, we're going back to America. But it was, yes, we did, we counted our days. And I remember back, you know, when the protesters were going on, okay? We didn't know what we were facing. Like I tell you, my friend and I, we came back as color guards with the Big Red One. We got off our planes, we had our uniforms on. There were still protesters. I remember I got off the plane walking into the airport. There were some protesters, hippies, whatever you want to call it. One spit on my face, called me a baby killer. My friend, I jumped over I don't know what, a rail, whatever, and I kicked his ass. Not because I wanted to, that's what they said, you know. And we, you know, till today, we are marked as baby killers. I finally, you know, after so many years, and with all the help that we've been getting, you know, I'm finally to realize that, you know, there's life after Vietnam. There's people here that still criticize us because of the benefits that we get. I hear it all the time. They tell us that, they told me one time, you guys take the government for a ride. You're taking it for a ride. I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Yeah, all you Vietnam vets driving all these fancy cars and motorcycles and I said, buddy, you got no room to talk. Were you there? You know, you guys might see us from the outside like there's nothing wrong with us, but inside we have scars. And those scars will never go away. And that's what, one of the things that really hurts me the most, you know, because they don't know what we go through. They don't know what we have. I have 50% Agent Orange. I gotta get up every morning, take my insulin, take my pills. They don't know that. They think that it was all glory. No, it wasn't. And is it still now? In a way, yeah, because we try to forgive. But, you know, you'll never forget what you went through. I mean, I know the walls there. They've even brought one of those traveling walls around here. I never went, because I don't want a face that I know I'm gonna see the guy, because I got the guy's name, you know. I don't want to go. Least I know about Vietnam, the better it is. I belong to the Vietnam Color Guard here, but of me attending Vietnam things, I don't. I'm to myself. I hardly let anybody what I go through. What I went through, you know, I keep it to myself. My kids ask me, how was Vietnam? I told them, I was there, that's all. I've never left Vietnam, it's still with me. The most wonderful feeling that you could ever have as a soldier, and knowing that you came back safe, that was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had. And I looked at Freddie and he looked at me and said, bro, we're home, welcome home. We hugged each other for about 15 minutes. He went his way and I came with my family. I had 5 brothers and 1 sister and my mom waiting for me. The only thing I've always questioned is, why did it take so long? Why did it take so long for the government to recognize us? That's all I have. I was proud to be an American. I was proud to serve my country. And until this day, I'm proud. I would do it again. I would do it again.
I'm Jim Harbison. I'm a Vietnam vet. I enlisted in the Army at 17, right out of high school, in 1962. I rose to the rank, went to my basic training at Fort Ord, California, and stayed at Fort Ord area for the next 4 years. Rose to the rank of buck sergeant as an infantryman, and then in 1966, I received a direct commission to second lieutenant infantry. So they simply called me out in front of battalion formation, peeled off my stripes, pinned my bar on, and said, "Okay, you're now a lieutenant." I stayed back in stateside until January '68, when I was shipped to Vietnam on the 18th of January, which just happened to be my birthday. So the U.S. Army, in its infinite wisdom, gave me a year's birthday present to a vacation to the Orient. When I got into Vietnam, we flew into Tan Son Nhut and got off as you open up the airplane and get off, you just got this solid blast of heat and humidity, which is, overwhelming at first. It was nighttime. They put us in a bus with wire grills on all the windows. None of us have any weapons, no protective equipment, no anything, and we're driving through dark parts of town in open area, and it's kind of terrifying in some ways. You have no idea what to expect. You've heard about, the bombings and the attacks and so forth. But for me, I spent my first year in the field. I lived in a foxhole. I didn't have a cot to sleep on. I had an air mattress that I carried. Hopefully it stayed inflated most of the time, and I blew it up every night if I could. Slept on the ground in a hole. I didn't even know where my battalion rear area was because I was in the 1st Air Cav Division and our company was forward deployed. So every day, every night, we would call in our logistics requests. They would bring in our ammunition. They would bring in hot chow at night normally, any new clothes that you needed or equipment. And then the next morning, they'd come in, they'd pick up all that stuff, and then they would pick you up on the next flight and drop you off someplace. And many times I'd be on the helicopter and the co-pilot or the crew chief would hand me a new map and say, "Lieutenant, this is where you're going," to an area we'd never seen before. We'd done no reconnaissance or anything. We just, all of a sudden, there may have been a B-52 airstrike the night before to clear a hilltop, and the next day we were inserted on that hilltop. Well, it's interesting because I mentioned that I went to Vietnam on my birthday on the 18th of January and Tet broke out on the 31st. So I thought, man, this is going to be a tough year. Probably had my first contact within the first 2 weeks that I was in the field. We did in the North Highlands area, the Bong Song Plains, we did a lot of search missions, so we'd go out and patrol, and so we encountered enemy soldiers in the villages and the mountain trails probably within my first 2 weeks. No real heavy contact, but you got 4 or 5 enemy soldiers shooting at you. You think it's a whole army. So I happened to get my Silver Star. I'm a Silver Star recipient. I got that in my first 2 months that I was in country. We were going into a village and were ambushed. Another platoon leader was wounded. His radio operator was killed. They were pinned down on a rice paddy dike, and I don't know, the adrenaline just kicked in, and I said, "We've got to go get them." So I led a group of people, soldiers of mine, that went out to rescue them and laid down suppressive fire on the village. The company commander then made a maneuver to go around and flank the other side of the village and got ambushed in the middle of the rice paddy, and he was severely wounded and pinned down in the middle of the rice paddy. So I then took charge of the entire company to rescue both the company commander and the platoon leader and the KIA. I spent my first 3 months in 2 Corps in the Northern Highlands, and then the Marines were still locked in and surrounded at Quezon. So my battalion deployed to LZ Stud at Quezon, and we spent a month there fighting and relieving the Marines. When that operation was over, my battalion was then deployed to just 1,500 meters south of the DMZ on the coast, above the last Marine base, which was called Charlie 1, which is an artillery fire base above Dong Ha. So our sister battalion had gone in the day before us and was really mauled, and they had about 170 casualties, and I want to say probably 80 KIAs. They were just devastated. So my battalion was then air assaulted in the next day to relieve them. We immediately came under artillery fire from North Vietnam. And after about an hour barrage, the counter battery fire from our side neutralized it, or at least stopped the firing. The next day, the company commander said, okay, we're going to go up an aerial recon for an ambush site. So a lesson learned for us on that, there was the company commander and the 3 rifle platoon leaders. Now remember, in an infantry company, you have 4 platoons. You have a mortar or weapons platoon, and you have 3 rifle platoons. So the company commander took all 3 rifle platoon leaders and himself up in the helicopter, and we were doing a recon, and we were shot down right off the DMZ. Very, very fortunate. I'm sitting in the middle of the helicopter looking through the seats, the pilot's on the left and the co-pilot at the dashboard, and all I can think of, it looks like a pinball machine on tilt. Lights are flashing, the pilot's yelling, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And of course, when we got hit, it did a 90-degree bank, and I'm looking over my right shoulder at the ground, and they're saying your whole life flashes by. It really did. There was no fear. It was just calm. You just said, okay, it's been a great life, this is it. And the pilot was marvelous. There was dry sand, there was one wet rice paddy, and he auto-rotated, and we slammed down all the way to the belly in this soft mud, which probably saved our lives, because it wasn't it was a hard impact, but not like it would have been on the sand, which had been like hitting concrete. I was the second person out of the helicopter. The pilot was the first one. He ripped his door open, jumped up, pulled all the cords out of his helmet. I jumped over the lieutenant that was next to me, and I was the second one out. Then a Marine helicopter flew in from Dong Ha, the old Korean War type helicopter, the old Sikorsky 34, came in and picked us up and flew us back. You know, it's just one of those things, you thought, it's not my turn. I'm a fatalist. I don't believe that when my number's up, I get to ask for new cards and get the shuffle deck. It doesn't work that way. I think being an infantry officer, you develop that kind of mindset. Part of what I did as an infantry officer was to make sure that if I was killed or wounded at any given time, it would make no difference to the platoon, because there was someone trained who knew what I was doing, where we were going, that could step right up and fill the void and not even realize I was gone. My brother-in-law and I went to Vietnam. He went 10 days before I did. I was due to come home on the 18th of January. He was due to come home on the 8th. He was a helicopter pilot. He was killed Christmas Eve. So I had the duty, and you can say honor if you will, to be the body escort, to escort his remains back to the States, arrange all the funeral arrangements, and then be the American government representative who takes the flag off the casket and presents it to the family. That's the toughest thing about my Vietnam experience, was that. From the time I was old enough to remember, I always wanted to be in the Army. So it was kind of a childhood dream, and so when I finished high school, I wasn't interested in going to college. That just wasn't appealing to me. So I enlisted in the Army. My folks gave me 3 choices. Find a job and pay rent to stay at home, go to school and you can live here free, or join the military. I feel that I'm very fortunate. I have not suffered from PTSD. I have no lingering thoughts or afterthoughts about the atrocities or the combat, and the slaughter and the maiming and so forth is stuff that's permanently etched in my mind. But I know that there are, even to this day, a number of Vietnam vets who still suffer from PTSD. The Vietnam Memorial that we built in Las Cruces is done out of a labor of love, and there's a motto that's been adopted by the Vietnam veterans. Never again will we allow soldiers to be treated like we were when they come home from war. So part of that is recognizing, you know, we contribute. We did what our government asked us to do, and then we were chastised for it by the general public. So it's a way for us to recognize each other and to recognize the families. I mean, New Mexico lost 398 of their young men in Vietnam. There's an attitude that hangs over Vietnam veterans that, you know, when you've suppressed putting your life on the line for 50 years because of public disregard or disrespect for your actions. They've put it behind them. They've just let it become part of their memory, but they don't share it with anybody because it was never the thing to do. And then many of them, at this point, the kind of attitude is, why bother? I mean, what's the point? There's a whole, at least their generation had no respect for them or what they did, and you're not going to change that mind. I think that's why many of the Vietnam vets may not be the ones that are pushing for the memorials. I contend that some of those who are guilty about how they treated the soldiers, who now are the ones who are the most vociferous about getting the memorials built to recognize the people, their classmates, their friends, their family members who served in Vietnam. So I think there's kind of a mixed bag on that there are those who may feel guilty, and this is their way of covering from that. There are others who probably were very supportive, but it wasn't a public thing to do, so now they have a chance that they can be vocal and express their support. And then a lot of the Vietnam veterans are coming out and saying, wait a minute, we deserve this. We earned this right. We made tremendous sacrifices on behalf of this nation. The military didn't get us into the war, the politicians did.
My name is Richard S. Reid Jr. The S stands for Stetson, my middle name, and that's what I go by. I'm actually called Stet by everybody. I came into the Air Force through ROTC at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. My dad was a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, my granddad was a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, and my great-granddaddy was a Confederate Lieutenant Colonel, so there was no doubt that I was going to be in the service. I had nothing else I wanted to do. The 23rd of June in 1971, I boarded a C-141 aircraft at Norton Air Force Base, California, and flew directly to Da Nang. I'm not sure I ever thought much more about it. It was just what was expected. I grew up in Auburn, so I'm used to 98% humidity. We stepped out and members of my unit were already there waiting for me, so they picked me up, put me in a Jeep, and took me off and got me into a barracks, a hooch as we called them. Took me around, get the fatigue uniforms because we had to pick those up from supply and then take them to a tailor to have your name tag and your rank and all that put on them. There was this smell that you couldn't get away from. It was there all the time. After a while, you just didn't even notice it. It's kind of like being in a hospital and not noticing the antiseptic smell. But it was a real stench. I ran the computer function in base supply, which gave us the ability that when pilots needed clothing, needed flight boots, needed flight gloves, if we needed to issue Agent Orange out so they could take and use it in the ops, my section did all the work that processed those computer inputs, generated the paperwork that said, take this over here and give it to this person. This was an old-fashioned UNIVAC 1050-2. The system we used in Da Nang had a total storage capacity of 28K, and the big system had 32K, which meant in terms of a process, to issue you a uniform, we would go through and do part of the process. We would store all those numbers and dots and dashes off, and then bring in another program and run it again and store everything off, and we would repeat that until the issue actually processed through and we were completed. There was a lot of interesting things going on. The Army controlled the food, so they had all the steaks and niceties, but we had, as Air Force supply people, we had the knives, forks, spoons, and paper plates. So we traded a case of paper plates and forks for a case of steaks, and built us a barbecue out back and had a barbecue. And we asked the Vietnamese people that worked with us if they could get us some potatoes that we could put in and bake. And I always remember the baked potatoes, when you cut them, were yellow. I'd never seen a yellow spud in my life, but they were, tasted like a potato, but they were yellow. You just press on. The fighter pilots taught us that when we were there. You know, you can't control what's going to happen to you. You can't control when the next attack is going to be. You don't know where you are going to be and what it's going to do. So you just keep on doing the best job you can do. Hope that, you know, you're in the right place at the right time. They came in with the wounded and the dead, but I was there and remember my response the first time I found myself facing an expired U.S. Marine. And that probably was the worst trauma I have ever experienced in my life. All our people around were relatively safe. We weren't in a combat situation every day. And then here is this Marine that was not in a body bag at that point because they didn't have the bags, and were just bringing them home. And I don't ever want to do that again. We had learned to put a flak vest on the ground next to the bunk and the helmet, and actually would roll out of the bed, hook that flak vest and pull it over and put that helmet all on in about 30 seconds. I tried it one day when I was totally sober and wide awake and darn near kill myself. But we had a rocket hit 20 feet away from our hooch, had revetments around it filled with sand, so we were pretty safe, but it went into the hooch next to us, and it did destroy the hooch, and the people in there were wounded but not killed. In terms of keeping morale up, we built a bar out back of the barracks so the kids could go in and party, and no one cared whether they were 18 or 21. If they were getting shot at, that was all it took to get them a chance to have a drink if they cared to have a drink. The officers had the officers club, and you know, when we lost people, there was usually a wake in the form of a big party, but it was there. It got to be a very interesting game. If the maids left, if Mama San disappeared by about 3 o'clock, and if the barber shop shut around 3 o'clock, we were 98% sure rockets were coming in that night. You just knew it because they disappeared. Getting something from home, what's going on, that made your world a little bit normal for about 5 minutes, where you could sit on your bunk and read something from your mother or your girlfriend, what they were doing and things like that. You saw me holding up the 2 envelopes. That was a red letter day, 2 pieces of mail in one day. Each day got closer and better, and as you in the picture, you know, we had a countdown calendar, and so we counted down the days as we went. In my case, I got delayed because an airplane went down, and they told me it was going to be a week longer, and I was not pleased with that in any fashion. My boss got involved and came back and said, if you want to be a classified courier, you'll have to put a gun on, and every time the plane stops to refuel, you have to stand by the cargo door on that airplane to make sure that no one goes in and gets classified. But if you want to do that, I can get you out of here. I was 1 day late leaving, so I have a year and a day on my credit. We were given direct orders that we would bring a duffel bag. We would have tennis shoes, not boots. We would have any color socks except black, because Air Force and Marines always wore black socks. And then some sort of casual attire that made it look like you might have flown in from anywhere in the world on a long trip, because you were going to be scraggly bearded by then. It was, you know, 20 hours or so, and so you were not going to look like a fresh tourist. I was just Joe Schmo walking through the airport with his bag. Yes, sir. Yep. Like I said, part of it's the family training, but it was important. Or my government told me it was important, and that was good enough for me. It's highs and lows, the lows of the sirens and the deaths and those sort of things are on one side, and then on the other side are absolutely enjoyed the Vietnamese people. And I got a chance to get outside the base. The young officers supported several orphanages. They were mostly Eurasian children there because the Vietnamese didn't consider them Vietnamese, and they were not well treated. And we would ride home and get stuffed animals, bats, balls, toys, anything we could, and make a monthly visit to one orphanage or another and spend 3 hours with the kids playing and passing out toys. The Vietnamese people were delightful people. And the farmers outside the cities, they didn't care. They didn't care who was in charge. They just wanted to quit have their crops destroyed and their water buffalo killed. The truth was that outside of probably Da Nang and Tan Son Nhut, most of the rest of the country was so illiterate, so poor, that they just wanted to be left in peace and be left alone. It was interesting because here I am on the 24th, still doing what I'm supposed to be doing in a uniform, and on the 25th, I'm flying home, and now I'm in civilian clothes, like that. And I'm trying to turn off a war in this side and be just a normal guy on the other side. And ever went anywhere in uniform from that point on. Over years, things got better, but it was so ingrained that we were so disliked that I just never would do that to myself. It hurt inside to know that there were people that were blaming us as individuals, but in fact, all we were doing is what the government asked us to do. That's very unlike what we see today, where now people are against the wars and have been for some time, but they're not blaming the individual soldier or airman. They're in fact very supportive of them. This past year we had the Veterans Parade, and we had a float and rode on it and actually had people applaud and say thank you. It was the first time in 46 years since I left Nam that anybody ever did that. And it wasn't just one person. It was a row of people down 10th Street, and it was just, overwhelming. I would have cried if I was the person who cried. We went over to do a job. The government said, this is what we need you to do. We went over and did that job, and we received almost nothing as a thank you. Yeah, I got the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry. I got the mission thing. I was awarded the Bronze Star for what I had done. From a military perspective, you got some thanks, but from the rest of the country, there was nothing.